for me, that's how negotiations go. And I think it's super fun. Like I'm a weirdo like that. I enjoy solving those problems that nobody else could solve. Okay.
Hi, friends. Welcome to Business Briefs, where you get legal and business bite-sized information and strategies and tips all in one episode. Today, I have the amazing Ashleigh Kilcup. I've had a great pleasure of just chatting with her before this conversation that we're recording today. She is the founder of Lease Leverage, and she's going to tell you all things about commercial leases that we want to know, but also some really inside information on how to not get yourself trapped into something that you don't even want to be in, especially for all those newbie business owners and even business owners who are online business owners, but now also want to have a actual brick and mortar business. And so you may not be new, but you're just new to commercial leasing. Welcome to Business Briefs, Ashleigh. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
I'm really excited to have you because I don't think I've had a commercial lease expert or someone who can give us some inside information on that. And I think a lot of times we just forget that that's also part of a business, is to have a brick and mortar, whether you're a store or whether you're an office space or whether you're a warehouse. It could be so many different ways that commercial real estate looks like. But Ashleigh, tell me, what do you do? What is your elevator pitch? And why did you start it?
Yes. So Lease Leverage. So I came up through commercial real estate. So that's what I do. That's my business, is consulting. I'm also a coach. So women's leadership, it's just something that I'm super passionate about. And so what I found is women from my industry come to me and be like, can you help me? Like, can you, like, I'm tangled up. But Lease Leverage was created after I had the pleasure of working for a few landlords. And, I negotiate against like the Fortune 20, right? Like, and it's a very different David and Goliath equation. And then I'm also, doing a lease with Sally, who just like owns her shop. She's busy as heck. And she's just, what I found was she was just agreeing to everything. And I would literally have to be like, go offline and be like, you should push back on that. Like there's room here. And what I realized was that there is an insecurity around legal and financial stuff for small business owners, especially women. And also they didn't know what they didn't know. And so I started searching for a resource to send them, right, to give them some help. It didn't exist. It was just a bunch of people on YouTube trying to sell their wares. And they were mostly, either title or brokers or attorneys. And as I mentioned to you before, they were like talking in the minutia. I mean, I do this stuff all day long. I'm like, oh my God, get there faster. And small business owners, whatever type of brick and mortar that you want to have, you don't want to become a commercial leasing expert. I get that, but you do need to know how to navigate, like to protect your business, what to look for, when to look for it, who to ask your questions of. And so that's really what I'm putting out there, is more of a strategy. And it's for people who are really good at everything else that they do, and they've just never done this before. Yeah. Right? Or maybe they tried it before and trusted some people and felt like, I'm not going to do that a second time.
I think it's so necessary. Just like before, also, we were talking about the fact that a lot of companies don't realize that you might need some type of commercial real estate. And, just getting into those leases, you might just be the person that's saying yes to everything because you assume it to be a standard. And at the end of the day, you can't trust the person across that table.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. And honestly, like I help landlords too. And most of them don't understand their leases either.
Yes.
So it's not even like, I mean, let's be clear, because I want to be really straightforward about, like, I don't think there's a bad guy in this equation. Mm-hmm. It's really that commercial real estate is like buyer beware, like most real estate. So everyone who plays in that space, they know that. You have to be careful about what you're signing. And like I was mentioning to you earlier, most of our only experience, if you're new to commercial real estate, any experience you may have was residential. Residential real estate is highly regulated.
Yeah.
To protect everyday people. Mm-hmm. Commercial real estate is not. It only has to follow the residential real estate laws in most states.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I also believe the reason might just be because people assume business owners to be more sophisticated in that sense. And I say that because in the legal world, that word is used a lot for regards to business owners or business people getting into a contract versus everyday people getting into a contract. And
Exactly.
like for everyday regular private reasons versus businesses. And so there's a little higher standard with regards to that. And that's where the word sophistication comes in. And not for any other reason, but for the fact that they just feel like you have more experience. There's more business backing behind you. And so that's probably why also they give a little bit more room for negotiation because they want businesses to make their own rules and have a little bit more freedom and, running their businesses.
Yeah. Well, and you know this. So the way that the law works is the owner, the landlord is inherently liable for anything that happens on their property. And they're usually, right, they own this big building, they're usually the deepest pockets.
Yeah.
So any savvy attorney could come after the landlord. So the purpose of the lease is really to transfer that risk to the tenant.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that because that is literally, I personally do not do on a regular basis commercial real estate. I have, though, have dabbled into it. I have had some experience in it. And truly, those contracts, you're just like, and I've always represented the person that is the tenant, essentially.
Right.
And so I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, wow, this is crazy. And
It's,
then I had
yeah.
to talk to my friends who are actually doing this all day long. And they're like, that's regular stuff.
Exactly. That's the part that's crazy, right? There's so much of that that's standard, but there is, as you mentioned, the contracts are set up in a way that expect you to push back. And
Yeah.
this is one thing that I just really want to highlight on, and something that I will say until I'm blue in the face, and why my company is called Lease Leverage. The tenants have the most leverage before you ever agree to the LOI.
Hmm.
So the letter of intent,
Hmm.
that is the document that captures the business terms before it goes into the lease. And so that is when, as a business owner, you need to say what you want
Hmm.
clearly and not take no for an answer. Obviously, look for win-win negotiations. I'm like a creative problem solver. That's all I
Yeah.
do. I keep pushing, pushing, pushing. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you want. And then I'm like, okay, this is what I can give you. Right. And so for me, that's how negotiations go. And I think it's super fun. Like I'm a weirdo like that. I enjoy solving those problems that nobody else could solve.
Yeah. Gosh, I love that. So actually, this brings me to a great point and something that I think some people who might be in it or maybe have done it a couple times but still not super confident. Walk us through the pre-signing, signing, and then things to kind of look for afterwards if things pop up with regards to commercial leasing. And, can you just kind of give us like a
Yeah.
bullet point walkthrough?
Yeah. This is literally the first course that I put out is basically this. It's like taking you through each step and telling you like what you need to focus on when, but I'll also just tell you now. So an even higher level is generally I consider, and this is what most small business owners miss, is this preparation. And so I have a checklist that I'll share with you. And a lot of what it covers is just having your financials ready, having your legal documents ready. They may ask for different things. I am not a fan of personal guarantees. Sometimes you can't get around it, but I always think it's super important to limit it in some fashion. So, it's not a all or nothing thing. Now, unfortunately, some unsophisticated landlords or unscrupulous will just, that's it. And it is what it is, take it or leave it. And I don't like them, but I think that's not how you play the game. Because really what it's meant to do is make sure that you have skin in the game
Yeah.
to follow your business through. We all know the statistics of how fast businesses fail, small businesses. And so that's what that is geared. It's to offset the risk of leasing to a small business.
Hmm.
So that's what they do. That's what their lender likes to see. So, but if you are doing a personal guarantee and if you're a small business owner, especially first time, you should expect that you're going to have some kind of personal guarantee because you're risky. You're just riskier for that landlord because you're new. And so with that, then you'll want to have some, personal tax forms and a personal financial statement, which is usually it's a balance sheet for you personally. And so having those things ready, I have a whole checklist. And if you read it and you're like, I don't know what that is, cool. That makes you normal. But you do want to have it ready because what happens so often is as you get into the negotiation and whenever the landlord asks for those materials, it's a real oh shit moment,
Mhm.
right? For the small business owner who's like running their business, trying to do this negotiation. And it's like, you want me to what? And so I think just getting that out of the way early. I suggest for small business owners that they start this process 24 months before they're trying to be open for business or they have a lease expiration.
Good idea.
That's going to make a lot of people freak out. It's way earlier than you would expect. But here's the thing, time is on the landlord side. So
Mm.
once you start running out of time, commercial real estate takes 9 to 12 months if you know what you're doing to go from like beginning of negotiation to signed lease. And if you don't know what you're doing or something goes wrong, you need more time. The closer you get to needing to be open, then the more the landlord can just say no to you
Mm.
and your request. So having more time, you want to be starting that negotiation as soon as the landlord will listen to you.
Mhm.
And it's okay to just ask. That's another thing that I find is so interesting is like people act like their landlord's this omnipotent force. Like most of them are an employee,
Yeah.
right? They'll just be like, no, not yet. Done. No big deal. When could I follow up? Like, when would you start engaging in this? And just don't let it be within 12 months. It should at least be 18 months before you're trying to be open or whatnot.
Mm.
So going back to your original question, preparation, then generally there's some kind of market tour, and the market is touring several properties. This is important, and some people don't want to do it because it takes time. You should have a broker on board. I recommend hiring all your people. The landlord pays for the broker. So get one.
Yeah.
But don't take what they say as gold.
Yeah.
They're real estate salespeople. It's very important to realize that their job is to tell you about the market. So they should know what's happening. They should know some information about that landlord, what they
The
like,
broker,
don't
right?
like. What's that?
The broker. You're talking about the
It's
broker.
broker.
Yeah.
Yeah, the broker should know. They should be expert in that area. And then also they should have recommendations for you for an architect or a contractor. So they're kind of like your connector,
Mm.
but you don't need them because they have all these online sites now. I just don't recommend that because it's a free resource
Hmm.
to you as the small business owner. So like use it, but just don't take everything they say as anointed information,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Like consider the source. They get paid when you sign a lease. So that. So you tour the market, then you should send out mm, between 2 and 4 letters of intent.
Hmm.
And there's a reason for this. So most people are like, but I like that one. Cool. You want to have more in the mix. The landlord and the broker will hear that you've submitted several LOIs, and that's allowed.
Hmm.
And you want to just naturally lean on their loss aversion and the psychology of like, I mean, it's like dating, right? Like they don't want to lose you. So they'll fight, they'll sharpen their pencils, they'll fight a little harder. If they know you only sent an LOI to them,
Mm.
then they're going to be like, gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's just natural, like just create a little bit of competition.
Hmm.
When you sign the LOI, that is when you've been like, okay, Jesus, take the wheel.
Yeah.
Um, because they're going to send you, that's supposed to capture all the business points. And so that's most of my emphasis is teaching you prior to that point.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned within my training, I have specific directions to give your attorney once you receive the lease. Usually they often call it a draft lease, which seems kind of odd.
Hmm.
But when that gets sent over to you, you want to double check that all the business points are in there. And then you want to have your attorney review it for an issues list. And that's super important rather than redlining because the landlord's not going to accept your red lines. Oh, and I didn't say this part, but we talked about this before. You need a real estate attorney
Yes.
to review the lease.
And there's not just like somebody who really does commercial real estate.
Commercial real estate because leases are super unfair
Hmm.
and like crazy in favor of the landlord. And that is normal. However, if you have any other type of attorney, because attorneys are all specialized, if you have any other type of attorney read it, they are going to be like up in arms. They are going to be researching stuff. They are going to be redlining. It's called a bloody red line when it's just all red, right?
Mm.
Like they're like, no, 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 no. And the landlord's going to say, that's adorable. No, like
Mm.
basically just reject it. It could kill your negotiation.
It could.
So you need a real estate attorney that knows what actually is normal and what's not normal. And
Mhm.
then if it's normal or not normal, like holdover is a really interesting one. I don't know why it's always like the stupid dance every time. So holdover is when you stay in the space and the landlord doesn't want you there anymore. It's basically like squatting.
Yeah.
It's the commercial equivalent of squatting, but it happens and it's kind of weird. So if you stay beyond when the landlord wants you to be there, then typically your rent goes, the lease will usually say 200%. So all of a sudden it's just to penalize you, right? Because they can't actually get you out of the space
Hmm.
because of real estate law, which
Yes.
is mostly based on residential.
Yes.
So, but every time, so the tenant says 125% and then the landlord says 150. And we're like, okay, good. Like, why don't we just start at 150?
Because they're going to negotiate down from
It's the
there.
dance. No, because if they can get away, this is commercial real estate right here in a button, is if they can get away with 200%, yay,
Yeah.
right? And they expect you to know to push back. But if you don't know, then you're
Yeah.
just going to be like, okay, 200%. What's holdover again?
Yeah. Yeah. So you just said so many important things right now. So, first of all, with the LOI, what should the LOI be? Is it just like, is it a contract or is it just an intent
Great question. Yeah, it's just the intent. So it's non-binding.
generally?
Um, what's that?
Is it generally, unless there's something in there that makes it binding?
Yeah. Well, typically there is a full paragraph at the end of every LOI that I look at that says this is a non-binding letter of intent.
Yeah.
But yes, you can enforce. So, and same thing, once you get into the lease agreement, I actually had a really interesting law firm I was doing a lease with when I was an office broker. And every time that we send the lease out, we say, this document is being reviewed concurrently by our client, and we reserve the right to make changes.
Hmm.
So something needed to get changed. They came after us, like full blown lawsuit. And
Mm.
because of that, just tiny little sentence that was in my email as I sent it out, it was like done. You have no basis. And those are the kinds of things that you just have to be super careful about, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so
What is the point of an LOI? Can you explain that? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the contract itself.
yeah, so the letter of intent is really so it's to get on the same page for the business point. And the
Hmm.
business points are like, well, it can be anything that would affect your business. So a very short letter of intent is bad for the
Hmm.
business owner. You want to have everything in there because this is when you have leverage. So you should be asking not just, and it's like, it's not just about the rent, right?
Hmm.
So you're going to talk about who the entities are, if there's any guarantees, how long of a lease is it,
Hmm.
what rent you'll pay, what will be the annual escalations, because it usually goes up automatically each year. And typically it's 3% because that's like usually, inflation.
Hmm.
But as you know, we've had higher inflation. So some landlords will push on that. Prior to this, crazy inflation, I used to always push my tenants to start with a higher rent and then have 2% escalation,
Hmm.
right? Like do the math. It's so much better. So your rent's going to go up by like, 103% each year automatically
Hmm.
for the term of the lease. You should ask for free rent or what's called rent abatement. You should be asking for tenant improvement allowance. Sometimes you can get away with asking for a moving allowance.
Hmm.
Something that I think a lot of small business owners don't realize because they think the landlord just inherently has all the power is most landlords are hurting a little bit right now.
Hmm.
So like you can get more, these are all called concessions. You can get more concessions. You can get more free rent. You can get more tenant improvement allowance. Those are one-time costs for the landlord,
Yeah.
right? And think about free rent. So if you move into your space and you're like, I want 6 months of free rent or I want 3 months of free rent, The alternative for the landlord is the space is sitting vacant,
Yeah.
which is also free rent.
Yeah. Yeah. Truly.
So,
Without
I mean,
potential
that's
rent.
an easy one to ask for. Now, don't go
Yeah.
crazy and ask for like 3 years of free rent. Make it reasonable. I would say typically like a month per year of term.
Hmm.
And it gets a little confusing here. I'm just going to clarify this. So, when we're talking about the lease, we usually talk about terms. Then we talk about lease term, and those are different. So,
Hmm.
lease terms is like clauses in the lease,
Right.
right? So, like how the lease is organized and what we're saying. And then lease term is actually the length of time.
The lease is for.
Yeah, exactly. So, you're signing a 10-year lease or whatever. Something else I love to just explain is most landlords, especially, more of the sophisticated REITs will look at the length of time. It's basically like a loan. Like they're going to give you upfront money, tenant improvement allowance, whatever, and you're going to promise to pay them over 10 years for this space that they already have.
Hmm.
And when you think about it that way, I think it makes more sense to
Hmm.
most people's brains. So the longer you promise to pay, the more valuable your lease is.
Hmm. Hmm. That makes so
And
much sense, though. That's it.
right? It's
Yeah.
like but these are some of the things that it's like if you
You
don't
know,
know, you'd never know that.
yeah.
So the longer term, so most small business owners want to sign a short term, right? Like 1 year, 3 years, all of that.
Hmm.
But if you can have a 10-year lease, now don't do that if that's not right for your business. If you're at
Right.
a but if you can, and you just don't want to, but you could, then you're going to get way more for free rent, way more tenant improvement allowance, which is usually given in like a dollars per square foot.
Hmm.
And so, yeah. But here's the thing about the letter of intent. And this is where, like, I think I bore people until their eyes roll back in their head. That's all. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's math. It's so easy, right?
Yeah.
The part that most small business owners miss, and where I just wish I could just zoom into their brain and give them this, is it's the rights. You need to focus on the rights you ask for in the letter of intent. So those are renewal rights.
Hmm.
Now, for me, leasing comes down to money, rights, and control. What happens when you ask for a renewal right is if you say you want to stay, that landlord can't do anything to get you out of that space. You have
Hmm.
the right to renew for whatever the terms are of that renewal right. Super powerful
Hmm.
because moving is a hassle. It's a
Hmm.
cost. And especially if you're a retail location, so like on Main Street on ground floor, you can lose major business over it.
Yeah.
So let's say that you know, let me use an example that might make sense. Like there's a Zumba gym next door to you and they want to grow and
Yeah.
they're paying more in rent. And the landlord's like, why not? Well, if you have that right, you're like, nope, like kind of talk to the hand.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna use my right and you just nullify it. Some of the other rights that I love are, let me think about this. If you think you might grow, then you would like to have a typically right of first opportunity on the space next to you.
Hmm.
You can ask for a right of first refusal. That's a stronger right, but most landlords will tell you to pound sand. So it's like if you just want them to say yes, which is in so many ways the goal, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
can go back and forth, like I'm going to be unreasonable, and then you be unreasonable, and then I'll be a little less unreasonable, and you be a little less unreasonable. Like just get there faster.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one of the things with experience. I can hop on the phone with these landlords and be like, come on, just do it. Like, do we need to dance, or are you going to just like put your big girl pants on?
Right.
And so getting there faster. But yeah, so those are the areas, and I'm still building it out, but I have this lease lab course that walks you through your preparation,
Hmm.
how to know how much square footage is right for you, what type of space you should be looking for depending on your business. Ends with the LOI, right?
Mm.
So I'm not going to just give you my letter of intent because I want you to understand what the heck we're talking about here.
Right.
The nice thing about the letter of intent is it's mostly English. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's already got that legalese. Sometimes they took the lease and they put it, basically just slapped it into the
Yes.
letter of intent, and you're going to see here with twos and all of that. But once it goes into the lease, I call it legalese. And I'm not special. That's like a term.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll read a lease and it'll be like me and the attorney. And I'm like, but seriously, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And it's not because I'm dumb. It's because it got so convoluted in the redlining back and forth that it's literally not a sentence anymore. And nobody knows the intent.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if your landlord is like the nicest, just an angel on earth, you still need to have a really strong lease, because you have to assume that everyone that negotiated it is going to get hit by a bus and won't be there when problems go down. And it will only be that document that has to explain to everyone what you guys agreed to, right? And it doesn't matter what was in the letter of intent. Nobody cares. It's only what's in the lease. So I see this all the time where, and actually a good letter of intent got negotiated and then it didn't get put into the lease, right? Like the landlord forgot, maybe.
Yes, that does happen. There's a lot of
It
things
does
that
happen.
don't
It
get
happens
put
on
into the
mistake and
lease.
it happens on purpose,
Yeah.
where it gets interpreted into the lease agreement as not favorable to the small business owner. So if you're not checking,
Mm,
my thing is trust but verify.
yeah.
So double check that that stuff got in there correctly, because at the end of the day, you have to assume it will be brand new people that may not be as nice
Mm-hmm.
interpreting that lease.
Mm-hmm. So true. There's that LOI may or may not make it into the lease, and you need to make sure that it's there. And if it's not there, then see if it still works, because the LOI is there, but then you can still have more conversations, and then things could slightly change or reflect it. But these are all such great tips. Great tips. I
Sorry,
mean,
I'm
it's
like
just
trying
like,
to just get it all out there.
no, I love it because it's truly like those red flags, but at the same time, giving a lot of experienced wisdom out to people. So that's also just, it's awesome tips. Just quickly, if there were like three, pitfalls that you would have to, three or five, which whatever number you want to pick, but pitfalls that you want to share with the audience that, hey, red flag, beware, this is crazy talk. What would that be?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's a good question. It's very hard to answer because I don't know what the landlord will throw in front of them. But one that we already talked about was personal guarantees.
Right.
So my personal opinion is you can have a personal guarantee for a period of time. So there's two ways that you can limit a personal guarantee. You can limit it by a dollar amount, which you would typically take as the leasing cost. So whatever the landlord is paying in commission, which is usually a percentage, any tenant improvement allowance, sometimes free rent. That one's a little tricky, but basically anything that they're like writing you a check for in the beginning of the lease, they deserve to be made whole on that.
Mhm.
So let's say that that amount is $300,000. Typically what I'll do is like round it up, maybe call it 500,000 and say this personal guarantee is for $500,000.
Mhm.
It's not for everything I own. It's not for my house.
Yeah.
It's not for my retirement account. It's not for that. I will repay you to that amount. Now, what I like to see more than that, or maybe is a time frame. So once I've been in your space for you, so you take that 300,000 or 500,000, and then you divide it by what you're going to be paying in rent. So you will be made whole by the rent I have paid in 4 years.
Mhm.
And at that point, my personal guarantee, poof, it automatically goes away.
Mm.
So personal guarantees are a huge one. And unfortunately, I feel like we are so many small business owners that don't have experience in commercial real estate are used to dealing with like the bank or whatever, where it's like, yeah, sign the document, right?
Mhm.
Like it's not negotiable. Yeah. But hey, guess what? It is
Mhm.
also with the bank. Like when you play at the commercial real estate level where you have like a $30 million building, you negotiate the terms with them. Now, not all of them. Again, you got to know the game to play it. But all that said is in commercial real estate, it's virtually all negotiable.
Mhm.
So you have to know what you want going in, which means you have to know what to know.
Yeah.
which is why I exist. It's like why I'm doing this is because like, how are you supposed to know that? It's
Yeah.
so unreasonable. Okay, so you asked for terms. I talked about escalations. That is where so many of that is how much your rent will go up each year.
Mhm.
Pushing on that can be really smart
Yeah.
because so most landlords are going to be reporting this to their investors, right? They don't own the building themselves. It happens, but it's rare because it's so freaking expensive. So they're going to just be reporting. And the number that they're so excited to see is that base rent.
Yeah.
So make it, yeah, give them the base rent they want and then have it escalate by 2% per year. Most people won't even look at that, but you do better over time.
Mm.
The other thing is, so like most base rents that you'll receive in an LOI, if you let the landlord give you the LOI, which I don't recommend, it's going to be written in their favor because they are them. So like get a letter of intent, a good one, and you can find them online. You really can. Just Google it. Or, get mine because it's the best. But so whatever they say is, let's see, I lost my train of thought on that. Don't let them draft your letter of intent. That would probably honestly be a huge tip right there.
Mhm.
Grab one that's written for the tenant.
But it's okay to get their commercial lease and have their attorney edit what you need edits, but you write the letter of intent.
Yeah, you will so it's only like the Targets of the world that say you'll be on my lease form. Thank you very much. And the
Yes.
reason for that is because Target, I mean, trust me, it's like this David and Goliath. And sometimes you're David and sometimes you're Goliath when you're negotiating. And it's like you just have to know which one you are.
Mhm.
And so, but the reason why Target does that is because they got targets all over the place,
And
right?
they have the control and power to do that.
They do have the control and power, but also, yeah, exactly. They can throw their weight around because, like,
Yeah.
who doesn't want a target?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but the
One
reason
of
is so
those.
for them to manage, if every lease was different,
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, what a nightmare, right? That's the same reason why the landlord has all the same lease,
Mhm.
unless somebody has leverage on them. And so if you're a one-off small business owner, just use the landlord's lease.
Mhm.
You will not win that fight. And you don't want to because you don't have a lease.
Mhm.
You're going to have to pay for someone to draft it. And I should mention this too. Real estate law is different by state.
Yes, it is.
So, like, if you do go Google something, now listen, if you put it into a letter of intent, they'll correct you if it's not allowed. But leases is a different ball game. That's a legal document. It's a contract. It's an agreement. It needs to be legal in your state.
Mhm.
And so there's things you can get away with in Florida that you can't get away with here in Washington
Mhm. Mhm.
because the laws are different.
So true. So on point. I love this. This was like such good information. This was such a like crazy packed information of an episode with you. Thank you so much. You really gave so much in abundance and I'm really grateful for that. Like I personally learned a lot just sitting here. I mean, definitely, and tell me something, Ashley. Is it something that do you help people across states or is it just in Washington?
I do. And the reason why is because I don't get into the nitty gritty. So I do leases all over. I mean, for my consulting, I do leases all over the country.
Mhm.
The strategy of commercial real estate doesn't change.
Right.
The laws do, but I hire an attorney, right?
As you
That's like,
should. As you
right,
should.
as you should, right? Like
As you should.
as much as I know about commercial leasing, I would never touch a lease without talking to an attorney,
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
good one.
Mhm. It's so true because I have attorney friends who are commercial real estate attorneys, and they know the nuances. They know the red flags even before they read the whole contract. They already know what to expect if something were to happen. They know what will go to litigation for sure, how to
Yeah.
mitigate that, how to make it less of a blow each time. And traps, there's definitely traps there and it's again,
Only exclusively. Yeah.
yeah, and it's not about malicious intent, but at the same time, it's like, what can I get away with? And
And that's commercial real estate. Like,
yeah.
that's why you have to understand, like, I call it the Wild West, right? Like, if you think that anyone's looking out for you, you're going to be disappointed. but there's opportunity in that too, as long as you know the game you're playing and who you're playing against. Another thing that I want to mention, and this is something that I hear a lot, and so a lot of people say, okay, but I have an attorney that's going to review this. But the timing matters so important, right?
Mhm.
So when you negotiated your letter of intent, most people don't have their attorney on board yet. Once you've agreed to that, the attorney cannot fight those terms back. It was agreed to. If you think I hired an attorney, so I'm good. Well, your attorney's hands are tied behind their back if you have a bad letter of intent.
Yeah. Yeah. So you want to hire them in advance, get them on board, and go from there. And,
Yeah. Or
you
just
can
take
have
my
an
course.
attorney, huh?
Or just take my
course.
course. Yeah. Because again, and like we talked about this, but attorneys are human too. And it's not a space you want to save money in. You want someone who's seen it all
Yeah.
and has seen the life cycle. So that's one of the things that I have that's really helpful is I worked on a 30-year-old portfolio. We were developing new buildings, but we were also dealing with renewals and transfers and relocations. And so I've seen what happens, like what happens when the business gets shaky,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Like, how does that conversation go? What are the options? What if someone breaches the lease? Then
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Right? So you need to know what happens. I always say that a lease agreement's like a prenup.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
hope you never need to use it. And yeah, you're super in love and do it. Like, read it and play it out like at that point in the future, something happened that now you're at odds.
Mm-hmm.
So it's supposed to spell out. And I think that's why a lot of small business owners, when they read their lease, they're like, oh my God, what is going to happen here? Right? Like, this is terrifying. And it's just spelling out, like, what if there's an earthquake?
Yeah. It's just like a
What
company
if you're
agreement.
crushed?
Yeah.
Like,
It's
I
just,
mean, just like who's liable? And again, they're transferring risk to you.
yeah. And it's just like any contract, though. You just need to have the expectations out there, the conversations that you've had. And that's when the letter of intent comes into play. And then you want to see that reflected into the contract ultimately as well.
Yeah.
And also, another thing would be just know that you need to hire your attorney and not an attorney that's representing you both, because that's just not a thing either.
That's
You
not even
want,
legal. That's
yeah,
a conflict of
that's not a
interest.
thing.
Yeah.
And so you
But same
want,
thing with the broker. All
yes.
the time, the broker, and this happens especially in ground floor retail. So when I was a broker, I did office, and this never happened. Like, there was a landlord broker, there was a tenant broker, because we're negotiating,
Mhm.
right? Like, how do you manage a negotiation when you have a fiduciary to both sides?
Yeah,
You don't.
you don't.
Yeah. You actually, what happens is you're going to negotiate for the person that's going to bring you more business down the road,
Exactly.
the landlord.
Yeah.
So yeah. So like, don't let the landlord's broker also talk you into representing you. No,
Yeah.
hard pass.
Yeah. And then, sometimes it
And the
might just,
attorney can't,
yeah,
right?
they
I mean,
can't.
correct me if I'm wrong. You're the expert here.
Well, there's definitely a caveat to that, but it's just never in good interest. It's always said this is a really bad idea, because at the end of the day, the attorney has to represent, like, you're representing your client, and in this case, who's your client? Like, there's a confusion. So no,
Exactly.
it's never a good idea. Even if both parties are like signing off to it, it just isn't, it's not a good idea for yourself. It's almost borderline unethical, if unethical altogether. So it's just like, no, thank you. Stay away from that.
Pull that like completely into the unethical category. And I think when that happens is if the tenant says, I don't have an attorney, right? And it's like, well, I guess it's better to have an attorney involved than not. But that is like, you're in the lion's den.
Mm-hmm.
The rule for us, so I'll hop on the phone. I'm not an attorney.
Yeah.
I'm like super not an attorney.
No.
So
We have
I can
experience.
I can hop on the phone with the landlord or the business owner, and that's called a principal call, right? So the principals of the negotiation can talk. Sort of like how you can sell your own house for yourself, but you can't sell someone else's house,
Yeah.
right? You can make bad decisions for yourself. That's allowed. But if the landlord brings an attorney, they will not hop on the phone with you unless you have an attorney, because it's not a fair fight.
Yeah.
That's bringing a gun to a knife fight. So they won't do that. You can have your attorney at anything, Like, and when I represent landlords, I have no problem hopping on the phone with the attorney.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, been there, done that. No problem. I don't feel outflanked because I've done it thousands of times.
Yeah.
But as a small business owner, just be careful. And there's also things that this is worth saying. If you're frustrated with your negotiation and where it's going and where it's at, do not hide behind email and whatnot, because it's a legal document, it's discoverable,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they can go back. Whereas just hop on the phone,
Mm.
talk to the human
Yeah.
and say, like, where are we? What do you recommend?
Yeah.
And again, most people that you're dealing with that are the landlord are really an employee. And
Mm-hmm.
so they're going to they're going to guide you. They're going
Yeah.
to be like, do this or do that, or ask for this, or maybe that. If you say, I can't do this, it's not like, help me. Tell
Mm-hmm.
me what I need to ask for to make this tenable so that I can move forward with this lease. They want you to sign the lease.
Yeah. Great tips. Great tips. Ashleigh, thank you so much. We've had amazing tips by you. Now, if somebody wants to connect with you, how do they connect with you?
Yeah, so you can go to leaseleverage.com. It's lease-leverage, because otherwise just too many letters.com. And I think I have a Facebook page. So good at social. And then I will send you the links to do that free download for the checklist, the pre-leasing checklist, which is just a really great way to double check that you have everything on your radar. Now, I'm going to caveat that they may not ask for all those things, but it's so nice when they say, okay, send me your financials. And you go, here you go. And that sets up such a nice cadence for feeling professional in your negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
If you have an oh shit moment, then that's not great.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're like, oh, okay, I'll get that to you. And it happens all the time. And they know what that means. You know what that means. It means you didn't have them ready. So being professional, being ready to just hand things over saves you so much anxiety.
I agree. And it gives you confidence in general. Even if it's not
Exactly.
required, it gives you confidence.
Right. Like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I have that ready. And the other thing that I'll put in there, and you can include it or not, but is just a link for a free conversation with me. So if you heard anything that I said here and you're like, the most common questions I get is this normal? And I'm happy to help answer those. I think everyone deserves to know what they're signing.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I think it would be so beneficial if you are getting into any type of commercial real estate, especially the more expensive it is. You definitely need someone like Ashleigh on your side. And I think you can't go wrong with stuff like that. Then, it's just, you're just protecting yourself and giving yourself more confidence just to kind of move forward.
Exactly. That's the thing, is it makes the negotiation easier to know where you are in the negotiation and just that confidence so that you can really step into your role as a principal, as a business owner, because you have earned that. And just because you don't know this playing field doesn't mean that you have any less right to be there.
Yeah.
It's that whole imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, this is something I ask every single guest that comes through. And my question to you is, what is your anchor? What holds you steady?
Oh, so good. Oh, the fact that I couldn't answer that right out the gate's probably not great. I mean, for me, it's my family, and they're crazy too. But for me, they're the spice of life. I have two young kids. One just turned 6 and one's almost 4. And watching them experience the world and ask me questions and explaining things to them it just gives you a different perspective on what it is to be human.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kids are wonderful. I have 2 kids of my own and I just love them. They're great.
I'm not saying it's easy. It's not. It's not for the
but it's worth it.
Yeah. And actually consciously raising them and appreciating the gift that is getting to witness them in all of their preciousness is it's really special.
I absolutely agree with you. Actually, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. All the information you've shared has been wonderful, just wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you.